the unfinished site. I've been in construction for over 20 years. I've worked on everything from high-rise condos in bustling cities to restoring old, crumbling cathedrals in the middle of nowhere. I've seen strange things before: a collapsed foundation, a coworker claiming to see ghosts in the shadows, but nothing compares to what I experienced at the Dawson Project. The project was supposed to be a simple one, a high-end resort on a remote plot of land in the northern woods, a stone's throw from a mountain range. The location was breathtaking, a perfect blend of untouched wilderness and serene beauty. The plans called for luxury cabins, a spa, a man-made lake, and even a network of hiking trails to draw in wealthy tourists. The developers sold it as a paradise in the wild, but to me it felt more like the middle of nowhere. The drive out to the site was a solid 2 hours from the nearest town, and there wasn't much but trees and silence once you arrived. It felt isolated. I tried to ignore the unease that crept over me as I first stepped onto the land. The air was cold, even in the middle of summer, and the ground seemed oddly soft, like it was holding its breath. But I've been in this business long enough to know not to let feelings get in the way of a job. The first few weeks were straightforward. My crew and I cleared the area, set up temporary offices, and started laying the groundwork for the cabins. It was hard work, but nothing out of the ordinary. Still, there were small things that began to gnaw at me. The machinery acted up in ways I couldn't explain. Bulldozers would stall despite being fully fueled. Drills would overheat in minutes. Even the generators, which we inspected religiously, would shut off without warning by plunging the site into darkness. At first, I blamed faulty equipment, but the pattern was too frequent, too deliberate to ignore. Then came the sightings. The first to notice was Pete, one of the older guys on the crew. He swore he saw someone standing in the woods one evening, a tall figure, cloaked in shadow, just watching. It was probably just a deer, I told him, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. But the sightings didn't stop. Other workers began to report figures moving between the trees, standing just at the edge of the floodlight's reach. One night, I caught something out of the corner of my eye while locking up the equipment. It was tall and dark, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. I called out, thinking it might be a trespasser, but it didn't move. When I approached, flashlight in hand, it was gone. I told myself it was stress. Long hours, bad sleep, too much coffee. It had to be messing with my head. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The first disappearance happened on a Monday. Jerry, one of the younger workers, was assigned to map out the area for the man-made lake. He was supposed to check in every hour, but by midday, no one had heard from him. I radioed him. Nothing. By late afternoon, a few of us went looking for him. We found his tools scattered near the edge of the woods, along with his hard hat. The hat was cracked as if it had been dropped or thrown with force. There was no sign of Jerry. No footprints leading into the woods, no broken branches, nothing. The ground where we found his hat was soft and muddy, but it was untouched. It was as if he had simply vanished. The crew was rattled, but we pressed on. Deadlines don't wait, and I couldn't afford to lose momentum. 2 weeks later, Raul went missing. He'd been operating a backhoe near the western edge of the site, and when we went to check on him, we found the machine still running, its engine humming softly in the stillness. His lunchbox sat on the seat, unopened, but Raul was nowhere to be found. I called the police, who brought search dogs and a drone to sweep the area. They didn't find a trace of him. Not a shoe, not a scrap of clothing, not even a footprint. By now, the rumors had started. The site was cursed, some said. Others believed the land was sacred, that we were trespassing on something ancient and angry. The sinkhole appeared a week later. We were pouring the foundation for the main lodge when the ground suddenly gave way. A massive hole opened beneath us, swallowing a cement mixer and nearly taking 2 workers with it. I rushed over to assess the damage, but what I saw stopped me in my tracks. The hole wasn't natural. The edges were jagged, but the walls of the sinkhole were lined with strange markings, symbols I didn't recognize, carved deep into the rock. At the bottom of the hole were bones, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, piled on top of each other. The air around the sinkhole was thick with the smell of decay, so strong it made my stomach turn. I called in experts to examine the site. Their verdict only deepened the mystery. The bones were human, they said, but they dated back centuries. Some of them were older than the country itself. The crew wanted to leave. Hell, I wanted to leave. But the developers were adamant that the project continue. They offered bonuses, increased pay, whatever it took to keep the team on site. That's when the dreams started. At first, I thought it was just me, but I overheard others talking about the same thing. Dreams of being buried alive, of suffocating under the weight of dirt and stone. Some dreamed of faces staring up at them from the ground, mouths open in silent screams. I stopped sleeping, drinking cup after cup of bitter coffee just to stay awake. But no amount of caffeine could keep the voices at bay. They started as whispers, faint and distant, barely audible over the hum of machinery. Then they grew louder, more insistent, until I couldn't ignore them. They called my name, urging me to go into the woods, to the sinkhole, to places I didn't want to go. One night, I gave in. I grabbed a flashlight and walked into the woods, following the whispers. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches tangling overhead like a net. Eventually, I came to an old well, its stones crumbling with age. The symbols from the sinkhole were carved into the stones, glowing faintly in the dark. "Mike?" A voice called from the well. "Come closer." It was Rawl's voice. I leaned over the edge, and something moved in the darkness below. A hand shot out, skeletal and cold, its grip like iron. "You disturbed us," a voice hissed. "Now you will join us." Faces emerged from the darkness, pale, eyeless, their mouths twisted in rage. I don't remember how I escaped. I woke up hours later at the edge of the site, my clothes torn and my body covered in scratches. The Dawson Project was abandoned shortly after. The land was declared unsafe, and no one dared to return. But sometimes in the dead of night, I hear the whispers again. "Mike, come back."